In a busy town filled with noise and dust, there lived two brothers named Daniel and Jonah. Daniel was the older brother and Jonah was younger. Daniel was a rich man. He owned many shops and houses in the town. People smiled when they saw him. Leaders invited him to important meetings. He wore clean, nice clothes every day. He walked with his head high and felt proud of his success. Jonah was poor. He lived in one small room behind an old building. The room was dark and cold. He worked small jobs here and there to survive. He often came home tired and hungry. Many people in the town did not notice him. Some people even laughed at him when he walked by. When their parents were alive, they loved both sons equally. They gave both boys the same love and care. But after their parents died, everything changed. Daniel grew richer each year. Jonah grew poorer each year. Jonah believed his brother hated him. He felt forgotten and unwanted. Each night, he lay on his thin bed and asked himself, "Why is my life like this? Why does my brother have everything while I have nothing?" Sometimes Jonah gathered courage and went to Daniel's house to ask for help. The house was big and beautiful with a high fence and flowers in the garden. Daniel would come to the gate. He would give Jonah some food, bread, rice, or fruit. But he never gave him money. He never invited Jonah inside the house. He never asked Jonah to sit and eat with the family. Daniel would say, "Work hard, brother. That is how you will succeed." Then he would close the gate and go back inside. Jonah would walk home slowly, carrying the food. But his heart felt heavier than the bag in his hands. He felt shame every time he asked for help. Jonah's heart slowly filled with pain and anger. The pain grew like a plant with deep roots. He began to believe his brother was the reason his life was so hard. He thought Daniel enjoyed seeing him suffer. This belief was wrong, but Jonah did not know that yet. This belief would soon destroy everything. One evening, Jonah walked into a large church building. He had heard people talking about it in the market. The lights inside were very bright. Music filled the air with loud drums and guitars. Many people were dancing and clapping. At the front of the church stood a man in expensive clothes. His name was Pastor Eli. He had a big smile and shiny shoes. His voice was sweet like honey when he spoke. Pastor Eli spoke with great power and confidence. His voice went up and down like music. People believed every word he said. He told the crowd he could see secrets that others could not see. He said he could hear messages directly from God. Jonah sat in the back and listened carefully. Pastor Eli spoke about enemies and hidden spiritual battles. He said some people stayed poor because other people were blocking their blessings through evil means. After the service ended, Jonah met Pastor Eli at the door. The pastor looked into Jonah's eyes and nodded slowly, as if he knew everything about him. Pastor Eli held Jonah's hand and said, "Your life is hard because someone very close to you is hurting you spiritually." Jonah felt his heart beat faster. "Who?" he asked with fear in his voice. Pastor Eli smiled a small smile and whispered quietly, "Your brother." Jonah felt like fire was burning in his chest. He could barely breathe. The pastor continued speaking, saying that Daniel had used evil spiritual ways to steal Jonah's destiny and blessings. "Your brother took what was meant for you," the pastor said. "He is living your life while you suffer. Only sacrifice and strong action can free you from his control." Jonah believed every word. His mind was confused and his heart was hurt. He did not know the pastor was lying. He did not know Pastor Eli had his own reasons for hating Daniel. Pastor Eli was angry because Daniel was rich but refused to give big offerings to the church. Daniel had also warned other people about fake pastors who only wanted money. This made Pastor Eli very angry. Now the pastor wanted revenge, and Jonah was the perfect tool. From that day forward, Jonah could not sleep well at night. Pastor Eli's words stayed in his mind like a drum that never stopped beating. Every time Jonah saw Daniel in the street, he felt hot anger rising inside him. When Daniel smiled and greeted him, Jonah saw mockery instead of kindness. When Daniel gave him food, Jonah saw insult instead of help. Pastor Eli kept calling Jonah to come back to the church. Each time Jonah visited, the pastor added more lies on top of the old ones. "Your brother sends evil spirits to attack you at night," he said one day. "Your brother is eating your blessings every morning," he said another day. "You will never succeed until your brother is stopped," he said again and again. Jonah began to pray, but his prayers were filled with hate instead of love. He stopped talking to his few friends. He stopped asking himself if these things were really true. He started watching Daniel closely. He followed him sometimes to see where he went. He imagined Daniel laughing at his pain behind closed doors. Jonah began to believe that if Daniel was gone from this world, his own life would finally change for the better. All the blessings would come to him. All the success would be his. At the same time, Pastor Eli was pouring more poison into Jonah's mind during every church meeting. The pastor was careful and clever. He never directly told Jonah to kill Daniel, but his words pushed Jonah toward that terrible idea. "Some battles cannot be won with prayer alone," the pastor would say mysteriously. "Sometimes God requires action from us," he would hint. Jonah was just a tool in Pastor Eli's hands, a weapon the pastor was sharpening to hurt someone he hated. Jonah's mind was no longer his own. The lies had taken root so deeply that he could not see truth anymore. His pain, his poverty, his loneliness, all of these made him weak and easy to control. He stopped thinking clearly. He stopped questioning the pastor's words. He stopped remembering the good times he once shared with Daniel when they were children. The plan was forming in the darkness. One afternoon, Jonah could not control his feelings anymore. He walked to Daniel's house with anger burning in his heart. His hands were shaking as he knocked on the gate. Daniel opened it, surprised to see his brother looking so angry and upset. "Why do you hate me?" Jonah shouted loudly. His voice was full of pain and rage. Daniel looked very confused. "I don't hate you, brother," he said calmly. "I just want you to work hard and build your own life." Jonah laughed, but it was a bitter, angry laugh with no joy in it. "You stole my life. You used evil ways to take everything from me." Daniel shook his head slowly with sadness in his eyes. "That is not true, Jonah. Those are lies someone has told you." They argued loudly in front of the house. Neighbors came out to watch and listen. Their voices got louder and louder. Finally, Daniel asked Jonah to leave and not come back until he was calm. That moment broke Jonah completely. His last connection to his brother snapped like a dry stick. Jonah went back to the church, crying like a child who had lost everything. Tears ran down his face as he entered. Pastor Eli saw him and opened his arms. He hugged Jonah and whispered in his ear, "Tonight is the night. You must be strong and take action." Jonah went home as the sun was setting. His small room felt darker than ever before. His hands felt heavy, as if they were carrying stones. His heart felt dark and cold. He sat on his bed for a long time, staring at the wall. Different thoughts fought in his mind. One small voice told him this was wrong, but many loud voices told him this was the only way to be free. He believed he was doing the right thing. He believed this was God's plan. He believed his life would finally get better. But lies were guiding him, not truth. Darkness was leading him, not light, and blood was waiting in the near future. A terrible thing was about to happen that could never be undone. That night, when the town was asleep and the streets were empty, Jonah walked quietly to Daniel's house. The moon watched from above, casting silver light on the dark path. Jonah's heart was beating so loud he thought everyone could hear it. His hands were cold and sweating. Each step felt heavy. He reached the gate and knocked softly. After a moment, Daniel opened the door. He was surprised to see Jonah standing there so late at night. "Jonah, what is wrong?" Daniel asked with concern in his voice. Before Daniel could speak another word, before he could even understand what was happening, Jonah attacked him with violence. It happened very fast. Daniel did not have time to defend himself or call for help. When it was over, Daniel lay on the floor, completely still and silent forever. Jonah stood there in the dark house, shaking from head to toe. His breathing was loud and fast. The house felt terribly empty and quiet. Suddenly, the truth hit him like thunder from the sky. He felt no joy at all, no freedom, no relief, only deep, terrible pain. Jonah ran from the house into the dark night. He ran all the way to the church, crying loudly like a wounded animal. His whole body was shaking. He found Pastor Eli in a back room, counting money from the day's offerings. Jonah fell to his knees and told the pastor everything he had done, expecting comfort and praise. But Pastor Eli's face changed. His eyes grew wide with fear. He stepped back quickly, away from Jonah. "What have you done?" the pastor whispered, his voice shaking now. "I never told you to do this." At that moment, Jonah heard voices from the church hallway. Other church members were talking, not knowing Jonah could hear them. "Pastor was so angry that Daniel refused to give large offerings," one woman said. "Yes, Daniel exposed him as a fake, and Pastor wanted revenge," a man replied. "Poor Jonah, the pastor used him like a weapon," another voice added. Jonah stood frozen, listening to every word. The truth crashed over him like cold water. He understood everything now. He had been used. He had been manipulated. He had been lied to. His scream filled the church and echoed off the walls. Jonah fell to the church floor and cried harder than he had ever cried in his whole life. His tears were hot and fell like rain. His whole body shook with grief and horror. He remembered every single word Pastor Eli had spoken to him over the past weeks. He now saw them clearly as lies, like looking at something in bright light after being in darkness. The truth hurt more than hunger ever did. The truth hurt more than poverty. The truth hurt more than loneliness. The truth was a knife in his heart. Some church members stood nearby, whispering to each other, not sure what to do. One woman said quietly, "Pastor was angry that Daniel refused to pay large tithes to the church." Another person replied, "That is why he always called Daniel a proud and stubborn man." Each word they spoke broke Jonah's heart again and again. He stood up suddenly and ran out of the church into the night. The cold air hit his face but brought no comfort. His hands were stained with his brother's blood, and his soul felt dirty and ruined forever. Jonah walked through the empty streets until morning came. Everywhere he went, he saw his brother's face in his mind. He could not escape the memories. He remembered how they played together as children. They used to chase each other and laugh. They shared food when times were hard. They protected each other from bigger boys who tried to bully them. "Why didn't I ask God myself?" Jonah whispered to the empty street. "Why didn't I think clearly? Why didn't I question those lies?" He wanted desperately to turn back time. He wanted to undo everything. He wanted to save his brother. He wanted to go back to yesterday, to last week, to last month, to any time before this terrible thing happened. But time does not listen to anyone's wishes. Time does not move backward. What is done cannot be undone. The sun rose slowly, painting the sky with orange and pink colors. A new day was beginning for the town. But Jonah's heart stayed completely dark. No light could enter there anymore. The news spread quickly through the town like fire through dry grass. Daniel was dead. People could not believe it. Women cried in the streets. Men stood together talking in low, shocked voices. Shops closed their doors. The market became quiet. The whole town went silent with grief and fear. Jonah hid in his small room, shaking every time he heard footsteps outside. He heard police sirens far away. Fear wrapped around him like a heavy blanket. At the church, Pastor Eli told people to pray for Daniel's soul. He acted holy and calm, raising his hands and speaking in a loud voice. But inside his heart, he was terrified. He knew Jonah might tell people the truth. He knew his lies might be discovered. Church members began to ask each other questions in whispers. Some remembered that Daniel had warned them many times about fake pastors who only wanted money. Doubt began to fill the church like water filling a sinking boat. People started to wonder if Pastor Eli was really a man of God. Pastor Eli called Jonah's phone many times that day and the next day. The phone rang and rang, but Jonah did not answer. He just stared at the phone, watching it ring. Finally, Jonah stood up from his bed where he had been sitting for many hours. He walked to the broken mirror on his wall and looked at himself. He did not recognize the person looking back at him. His eyes were red and empty. His face looked older, like he had aged 10 years in one night. "I killed my own blood," he said softly to his reflection. "I killed my brother, my only family." The words felt heavy in his mouth. Speaking them made them more real, more terrible. His pain began to turn into anger again, but this time, the anger was not pointed at Daniel. This time, the anger was pointed at Pastor Eli, the man who had filled his head with lies, the man who had used his poverty and pain as weapons, the man who had turned brother against brother for revenge and money. Jonah made a decision. His eyes became hard and cold. That evening, Jonah returned to the church. A special service was happening. Many people had come to pray about Daniel's death, not knowing the full truth yet. People were singing hymns and worship songs. Their voices rose together in the large room. Pastor Eli stood at the altar in his finest clothes, shouting prayers with his arms raised high. Jonah walked in slowly through the back door. No one noticed him at first. They were all focused on the pastor and the music. His heart beat loudly in his chest like a war drum. His hands shook at his sides. His mind replayed every single lie the pastor had told him, over and over. Pastor Eli lifted his hands even higher toward the ceiling and shouted, "God is with me! God protects me!" Jonah walked forward through the crowd. People began to turn and look at him. Something about his face made them afraid. He stopped in the middle of the church and shouted, "You lied!" The music stopped immediately. The singing died. The church became completely quiet. Everyone turned to stare. Pastor Eli froze at the altar, his arms still raised. Jonah's voice was loud and clear now. All his fear was gone, replaced by terrible anger and grief. "You lied to me!" he shouted again. "You filled my head with lies! You told me my brother was my enemy! You told me he stole my blessings!" People in the church gasped. Some covered their mouths with their hands. Pastor Eli tried to speak. "Brother Jonah, please calm down. Let us pray together." But Jonah interrupted him. "You wanted revenge because my brother exposed you as a fake, because he refused to give you money. So you used me. You used my pain. You used my poverty. You turned me into a weapon." The pastor's face became pale. He stepped backward, shaking his head. "I was trying to help you," he said weakly. Jonah laughed, but it was a terrible sound, with no happiness in it. "Help me? You destroyed me. You destroyed my brother. You destroyed everything." He told the whole church the truth. All the lies the pastor had spoken, all the manipulation, all the hatred that had been planted in his heart like poison seeds. People in the church began to cry. Some were angry. Some were shocked. Pastor Eli held up his hands and begged, "Please, brother, I made mistakes, but we can fix this together. Let us pray." Jonah's face twisted with pain and rage. "You destroyed me," he said quietly. "There is nothing left to fix." In one terrible, violent moment, Jonah attacked Pastor Eli at the altar where he stood. People screamed and ran toward the doors. Children cried. The music instruments fell over with loud crashes. Fear filled the entire room like smoke. People pushed and stumbled over each other trying to escape. When it was over, Pastor Eli lay on the church floor near the altar. His expensive clothes were ruined. His body was still. Jonah stood alone at the altar, breathing heavily. His chest moved up and down rapidly. He looked around the empty church. Only a few people remained, hiding behind chairs and columns, too afraid to move. Candles flickered on the altar. The light and shadows danced on the walls. Blood stained the white floor. Jonah dropped to his knees on the hard floor. "There is no way back," he whispered to himself. Outside the church, police sirens grew louder and louder. Red and blue lights flashed through the windows. People were shouting. Jonah stood up slowly, very slowly. His heart was completely empty now. No anger remained, no fear, no pain, just emptiness. Only regret lived in his heart now, deep, crushing regret that felt like a mountain on his chest. He looked up toward the ceiling, toward heaven, and said in a quiet voice, "God, forgive me. Please forgive me for what I have done." He thought about his brother Daniel. He thought about their childhood. He thought about all the good times that could never return. He thought about the life he could have lived if he had only asked more questions, if he had only trusted God instead of trusting a liar, if he had only loved instead of hated. Before anyone could reach him, before the police could enter the church, before anyone could stop him, Jonah ended his own life. The church fell into final, complete silence. Even the candles seemed to stop flickering. Everything was still. Later, when people spoke of that terrible day, they called it the darkest day their town had ever known. The next morning, the whole town woke up in deep fear and sadness. 2 deaths in one day were too heavy for people's hearts to understand or accept. Police blocked the church entrance with yellow tape. They also blocked Daniel's house. People stood far away on the street, whispering to each other and crying. Some people could not believe that quiet, poor Jonah had done all these terrible things. Others blamed the church for letting a fake pastor mislead people. Inside the church building, the altar was completely quiet now. The place that once held joyful songs and prayers now held only sorrow and blood. An old woman standing outside said, "This church used to give us hope and comfort." A man next to her replied sadly, "Now it gives us only tears and nightmares." At Daniel's house, many people gathered. His body had been taken away by the police, but his presence still seemed to fill the rooms. His children cried and cried for their father. His wife sat silently on a chair, staring at the wall, unable to speak or eat. No one could find Jonah's body at first. When they finally did, the town cried again. People asked the same question again and again. How did things go so wrong? Nobody had an easy answer. Some blamed Jonah, some blamed the pastor, some blamed poverty, some blamed the church, some blamed the town for not caring for poor people better. But everyone knew one clear thing. Lies had planted the first seed of all this pain. If Pastor Eli had not lied, would Jonah have acted? If Jonah had asked questions, would he have believed? If Daniel had been more open with his brother, would Jonah have felt so abandoned? These questions hung in the air like smoke that would not clear. The town felt broken. Trust was shattered. Faith was wounded. Families held each other closer, afraid of losing loved ones. Parents looked at their children differently now, wondering what pain they might be hiding inside. Pastors looked at their church members differently, wondering if anyone else was being deceived. The story spread beyond the town. Other villages heard about it. People came from far away just to see the church where it happened. Everyone agreed. This must never happen again. The police worked carefully, asking questions and gathering evidence. They wanted to understand exactly what had happened and why. They spoke to many church members. Most people told the same story again and again. Pastor Eli talked too much about enemies and spiritual warfare, one woman told the officers. He always made us afraid. He constantly asked for money, another man said. If you did not give large offerings, he said you would be cursed. He especially hated people who questioned him, a young person added. He called Daniel proud and rebellious because Daniel warned us about fake pastors. The police found text messages and phone call records between Jonah and Pastor Eli. They read them carefully. The truth slowly came into the light, like sunrise after a long night. The town leaders held a meeting together. They sat for many hours discussing what had happened. They agreed that the church had failed its people badly. Daniel's past warnings were suddenly remembered. People felt shame for not listening to him when he tried to help them. One police officer said, "Jonah was not born evil. He was confused, broken, and desperate. But lies pushed him over the edge." The case was eventually closed by the police, but the pain in people's hearts was not closed. It remained open like a wound. The town learned important lessons, though the cost had been terrible. They learned that words can kill people, even without weapons or poison. They learned that lies are as dangerous as fire. They learned that blind faith can destroy lives. Town leaders made new rules. All churches would be watched more carefully. Church money would be counted openly, not in secret. Religious leaders would be questioned if they taught fear and hatred instead of love. Children began to ask very hard questions that made adults uncomfortable. "Why did Jonah believe the pastor so easily?" one child asked. "Why didn't anyone help him when he was suffering?" another wanted to know. "Why didn't God stop this from happening?" others wondered. Parents struggled to answer these questions. The answers were not simple. Teachers decided to tell the story carefully in schools. They explained that faith should bring love and peace, not fear and hatred. They said that anyone who asks for blind loyalty without allowing questions is dangerous. The church building stayed closed for many long months. Some people wanted to tear it down completely. Others said it should remain as a reminder. Finally, after much discussion, the church was allowed to reopen. But it was completely different now. There was no loud shouting from the pulpit anymore. No talk of enemies and curses, no pressure for money, no threats about spiritual attacks. A new leader came to guide the church. The people chose him carefully. He was a humble man who spoke softly and welcomed all questions. He encouraged people to think for themselves. On the church wall, they painted a sentence in large letters: "Faith without love is empty." People began to pray again in that place, but this time with open eyes and thinking minds. They promised each other never to follow any leader blindly again. They promised to ask questions. They promised to seek truth. They promised to choose love over fear. The church slowly became a place of healing instead of control, a place of genuine community instead of manipulation, a place where honesty mattered more than money. After Daniel's death, people began to discover things about him they had never known before. A poor woman came forward with tears in her eyes. "Daniel once paid my entire hospital bill in secret," she said. "I never knew it was him until now. He saved my life." A young boy told everyone, "Daniel bought my school books when my father died. He did not tell anyone. He just helped me quietly." Slowly, the town realized that Daniel was not the hard, proud man they had thought. He was actually quiet and kind, but he helped people in secret. Daniel believed that helping should be done silently, without announcing it to everyone. He feared that giving money too openly would make people lazy or proud. He wanted people to work hard and build their own success. But he never wished his brother any harm. He gave Jonah food because he cared. He refused money because he wanted Jonah to be strong and independent, not dependent. Jonah had never known these things. He had misunderstood everything. Daniel's wife gathered the town one evening in the square. With tears streaming down her face, she said, "If my husband were alive today, he would forgive Jonah." Years passed slowly. The intense pain softened bit by bit, though it never fully disappeared. A small center was built in Daniel's name to help young men find work and learn skills. They said, "Let something good rise from this pain." A tree was planted in the town square for Jonah, not to honor what he did, but to remember that pain ignored can become dangerous. The tree grew tall and strong. People called it the Tree of Memory. Elders began to tell the story under the moonlight to children and grandchildren. They told it not to create fear, but to teach wisdom. They said, "Do not let anger guide your steps. Do not trust words without checking if they are true. Do not let pain turn into hate. Ask questions. It is not a sin. Love should never demand blood." And they always ended the story the same way. Jonah lost his way because he stopped thinking. Daniel lost his life because lies were louder than truth. Pastor Eli fell because greed ruled his heart. But you, they told the children, you must choose a better path. Think, question, love, and never let anyone plant lies in your heart. The story refused to die because its lesson was needed in every generation. It traveled to other towns, other countries, other times. And wherever it went, it asked people to be careful, to be wise, and to choose truth over lies, love over hate, and questions over blind faith.